So Paul, welcome back. Haven't seen you for a while, so it's great to have you back. And I know for this week's video, really we were talking, I suppose as we were prepping for this, I think the angle we were looking to think about was, this idea of the coaching work that we do and how we provoke and help people with with breakthrough thinking, if you like, in whatever it might be. So their thoughts, their behaviours, how they're showing up into work or their team or whatever it might be. But you've got an interesting kind of take on this, which is getting people to think about this idea of side effects. So I'm wondering for this week's video, you might just tell me, how you get people, where that idea has come from, and maybe how you get people to tune into possible side effects and how it might impact them in terms of making those breakthroughs or changes to behaviour or whatever it might be.
Yeah, sure. It's good to be back. It's been a busy couple of months. It's
Yeah.
yeah, I guess I was thinking about this in terms of if you go to the essence of what we do with our clients, and obviously what we try to do for ourselves as well, is having moments of breakthrough, whether that's at an individual level in terms of our own personal lives, whether that's how we show up as a leader, whether that's in relation to our teams, our businesses, whatever it might be. But I guess having a breakthrough moment at its simplest is around something is changing, something is shifting that allows us to think maybe a little bit differently about some of our patterns of behavior that we have been doing. And I think in terms of facilitating those moments, which is really sort of at the heart of what we think we do, and I hope we do with our clients, is understanding, are we aware of the side effects or the consequences of choices and things that we're doing? And I think if we think about our own purpose, in below the line around raising consciousness, inner potential and performance, one conversation at a time, I think raising consciousness is really important, and being aware of the side effects is a huge part of that. So a simple example, I mean, and you could look at this at different levels, is if you look at it at the me level, at the individual level. So if we think about, am I aware of the side effects or the consequences of some of my actions? So it's a very simple example. Say lots of people at the moment obviously are working from home. And you and I have previously chatted about the role of transition rituals in facilitating sort of coming from, you and I in our home office right now, we finish a day's work at whatever time, you go into the next room. There isn't a sort of a commute or a walk or a run home, say, as a decompression.
Yeah.
So if you think about something like that, say if anybody comes out of a busy work, maybe a stressful or a challenging time in work, they go into the next room, effectively they're with their families, and unintended side effects there for them in terms of what they're carrying into that room could be a lot of energetic stress, of anxiety, of negativity potentially. And in the absence of not being aware of that, they're bringing all this into, say, their kids, maybe their wife, their husband, etc. So part of that could be a side effect. There is how it affects them in the moment with their family, how it affects their relationships. But also then as well is understanding that I'm actually what you're potentially role modeling for your kids there, which might be, I'm a bit anxious, I'm a bit snappy, I'm not present. Maybe I'm still pulling my phone out because there's something lingering from work that I haven't sort of resolved. That's just a simple example of, here's an unintended consequence probably from some of what we're doing, but that sort of stems from, I think, or begins if we're not conscious of it, if we're not aware of it. If we're more aware of it, then it can impact the choices we might make in terms of how we box things off at the end of the day, how we transition out of that. And that can go to so many different levels. That's just an example, if that makes sense at a personal level.
Yeah, and I know, like, from the chats I've had with, say, Ian around that, consciousness piece, like, I know he's kind of almost stuck those two words together. So making you consciously aware, and this kind of almost concept of side effects, as I listen to you talk about it, it's almost like it helps you potentially step outside of yourself and look at, where what you're doing where it's potentially playing out in negative ways for you, as a way of helping you kind of almost turn the lens on yourself and say, back to that point of being consciously aware. Well, if you think about that in the context of side effects, it just gives you another angle from which to look at yourself, I think.
100%. I think that's a
Yeah,
great way of terming it as well, is just stepping outside, stepping back from ourselves, and there's obviously things that we can do to help that. Um,
yeah,
but I think I think awareness, the more we're doing this work, the more I think you and I get to work with people and obviously experience life ourselves. I think the more I'm starting to realize that someone's level of consciousness is going to have such a profound conscious awareness is going to have such a profound impact on the quality of their lives, both
yeah,
personally and professionally. And this can, as I said, this could go through so many different areas. So if you think even about this in terms of how people show up and the side effects of actions in a team context or
yeah,
in an organizational context, um, very simple example, people who maybe aren't as present in meetings. Obviously right now it's virtual for lots of people, but even, and we'll get to that again, even when people are in a room, someone picks a phone out and maybe checks something in a meeting, somebody's not distracted, there's side conversations maybe going on in wider groups or meetings, and there's side effects to that, there's consequences to that, which can be, whether it's explicitly expressed or not, people not feeling listened to, not feeling valued, maybe feeling disrespected.
hmm,
Actually, you're not in the room here. So there's often, sometimes there's these small things or perceived small things that actually manifest over time, and create challenges and problems. So I think the more aware we are of how we're showing up and the side effects of what can happen through either saying yes or saying no to things, and the
yeah,
choices that we make, they'll impact us at so many different levels.
yeah, yeah. And talk to me about, for someone who's watching this video now, kind of how do they, what's your advice for getting them to think about this idea of side effects? How do they start, or what would you advise?
Well, I think it's it's a great question. It came up in a session that we were doing yesterday, something around this, and it came up in the context of how somebody who was trying to make time for themselves to meditate, and she was saying, God, it can be challenging because I go for 10 minutes somewhere and I have somebody looking for me in the house,
Yeah,
and that can be tough. And there's a perception there: am I being selfish? Because I'm doing that, and the way the conversation went is that I tend to look at the self piece in selfish. So looking after ourselves is so important because that's impacting and it's interacting with how we
yeah,
connect with other people and how we show up. So I think, I guess a couple of things. One would be is to maybe sit down and consciously think of and put this into one sentence. How do you want to experience your life? And it can seem a really simple thing to do, to try and get it into one sentence. But if you think about how do I want to experience my day-to-day life right now, having clarity on that for me is a really useful reference, as nearly like a sort of an inner compass to
yeah,
go, okay, this is how I want to experience it. So if I'm consciously aware of that, let that impact how I bring myself into situations.
yeah,
Um, Second thing I think I would think about is making time for what we've chatted about before, is around your DNA, your daily non-negotiable
yeah,
activities, the things that you can do to look after yourself. Because I think the more we're looking after ourselves mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, um, the more aware we are, the more calm we are, the more present we are. And I think all of those things contribute to then being that little bit more consciously aware of side effects, obviously good ones as well. We're maybe focusing on the ones that we don't
yeah,
want to see. And I think the third piece, which sort of comes into this, is, and I've only really come to this in the last couple of years, is meditating.
yeah,
I think it's hugely powerful. I've had people say to me, "This has been a game changer." I've had some people say, "I've tried it; it's not for me." Um, I would always challenge somebody on that. When you try something, it takes a little bit of time and it's a
yeah,
skill to build up and develop. But I definitely feel, that's even just that simple act of 10 minutes a day or 10 minutes a couple of, start to build this muscle memory
yeah,
of doing it. It's
yeah,
massive, I think,
yeah,
in terms of awareness.
yeah,
There's a couple of things, I guess, just on a practical
yeah.
level.
And I guess another question potentially, in the context of stepping outside yourself, is maybe how do I want other people to experience me?
Absolutely.
Because if, you know, back to the analogy of kids and phones, for example, if I don't want them to grow up on the phone, then they've got to have some experience of me not being constantly glued to it, or having a healthy relationship with my phone where I can leave it down for a while. That's another potential question to look at.
Absolutely. I think it's a great
Yeah.
question. And again, that spans everything. That spans somebody in different aspects of their identity, of the roles that they have in their life, as a dad, as a husband,
Yeah.
as a colleague, as a friend, as a leader in a business. Yeah, I think it's a really, really good point. And I think sometimes a big part of this, it's simply making the time to reflect on this. So whether that's 20 minutes out for a walk, don't bring anything with you. Bring a couple of good questions in your pocket. Reflect, reflect on that. I think it's a big thing is just that making a little bit of time and space in our day-to-day for this.
Yeah. Fantastic. That's great. Well, listen, good to have you back. A great little idea to kind of get our I suppose reframe some things for us and get us thinking. So thanks, Paul. That's great.
Good stuff. Good to be back. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah.